Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. Have I got a bonus upload for you all? Before we jump into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. The merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this horrifying bonus upload, shall we? Tonight's first terrifying experience. I've been sitting on this for many years now. My aunt has owned a large piece of land, over 100 acres, in northwest Connecticut for many years now. Her property is located in a state park that is mostly uninhabited and only frequented by backpackers. Her land is well off any main roads, and we have to drive through a lot of forest to reach her home. She bought the land and remodeled an old house that was already built on it so that it was more livable. And going up to visit her always had been my favorite thing to do. I've been going up there yearly since I was a baby, and I've spent countless hours exploring the woods, creeks, and land around her home. We call it a farm, although it is not a true agricultural or livestock farm. My aunt does rescue miniature horses, alpacas, donkeys, and back in the day there were some ducks. The animals are on one part of the property where the area has been cleared out for them to graze, get fat, and be happy. The rest of the farm is untouched woods. In the early 2000s, she decided to install a 12-foot fence around the property, although it only encloses about 80 acres of the land she owns. She explained to me that she couldn't stand the sounds of the coyotes howling right outside of her window at night, and that she had some creepy encounters while living there. She didn't go into details of these at the time since I was a young child. She lives alone, so I understand why she wanted to feel a semblance of security in those deep woods. We are originally from the bayous of Louisiana, so being in this type of environment was new to all of us. Anyway, despite being initially unfamiliar with the land, I eventually learned to navigate the area very well as a child. I had my few favorite spots, and one was up on a small foothill in the deepest part of the woods. I would go up so often that eventually a small path was established in the brush, and I would bring my cousins with me to show them my little oasis. In 2008, when I was 10 years old, I took a summer trip to my aunt's and brought my best friend Alex with me. She and I would often take trips here together during our childhood, and this was not her first time accompanying me to the farm. I remember that we were in the woods at my favorite spot, sitting together and listening to Katy Perry while playing Doodle Jump on our new iPad Touches. This makes me laugh to remember, but we were just trying to enjoy some nature while getting our fill of new tech, I guess. We were there for a while enjoying ourselves and talking about random kid stuff when this shift in the air, almost like a suffocating stillness and silence, settled upon the woods. I paused the music and I looked to Alex, who was already staring at me with a concerned and worried expression on her face. We stayed still and silent for a moment, tilting our heads to listen to the woods and search out any of the familiar sounds that normally crescendoed day and night across the farm. There were no birds, no summer bugs, and the trees almost seemed to stand frozen in place, as if the light winds that normally rustled their leaves left us completely. It was a vulnerable, terrible feeling, and I knew Alex felt it as well. Then began the sound of footsteps coming from even deeper in the woods. It took a moment for me to determine what the sound was, but the distinct rhythm of weight being picked up and put down on leaves and brush was impossible not to notice. It was bipedal and heavy, and was coming towards us from a steep slope down the side of the mountain/footfall. I remember thinking that it was impossible for a human to move so easily through that part of the woods, since it was very thick with growth, fallen branches, trees, and rocks, even making it hard for an agile child to navigate, let alone a large adult. It felt as if the woods lie still and wait while these footsteps made their way swiftly up the steep incline toward us. "Do you hear that?" I asked Alex in a whisper, and she nodded. "It sounds like footsteps," I continued. She nodded again, looking like she was about to burst into tears. I took her hand and began running down our makeshift path with her, trying not to fall or let her lag behind me at all. We didn't stop until we reached the house. I don't think we told anyone that day because we were just too shaken to even comprehend what might have been out there with us. The next day I asked Alex if she would go back out to the spot with me. She was very hesitant at first, but eventually agreed, and said we could go look for signs of another human. We made on our way back, nervous but determined to discover what had invaded our little sanctuary. When we reached the spot, I looked down toward the direction we had heard the footsteps. I think I even slid down a bit to investigate possible indentations in the brush and leaves. I didn't go too far because I was about to lose my nerve, and I hadn't noticed much anyway, so I quickly climbed back up to where Alex waited nervously for me. We decided it must have been some sort of animal or a deer, despite every logical explanation indicating otherwise. I knew what deer sounded like, and this was no deer, but I wanted to forget and have fun. We took our iPads out and began the same ritual of relaxing and playing games while chatting about nonsense. It seemed that things were back in their natural order again, so we quickly forgot about the terrifying experience and let our naive, childlike wonder take over. After a little while, the stillness returned, and it happened so quickly it felt as if the forest took a gasp and never exhaled. This time the footsteps started almost immediately. They were louder and coming from a different direction. The best way I can explain their location is that it was in a similar spot to the day before, but somewhat more to the right, where the forest was very dark and the incline to reach us was less steep. I didn't wait too long to run, but it was long enough to realize that the sound was faster, closer, and definitely not a deer or a bear. I didn't look into the woods too closely because I wanted to get the hell out of there and was too scared to see whatever it was. I knew it was close enough that it would be upon us at any moment if we didn't flee, so without a word, Alex and I took off and ran as fast as humanly possible out of those woods. It's not a super exciting experience, but that is my first creepy experience in the woods. I have since had more, as I am an avid backpacker and love the outdoors, but the experience on her land had always been the most bizarre and unexplainable. A little more info on the experience. The area we were at was pretty far away from the main house and any other civilization. We asked my aunt if there were any men on the property, and she said no. There were not. She Also confirmed that the gates were in working order, although it wouldn't be hard for a bear to breach them or for a fox to dig underneath them. Tonight's second encounter. I had a very strange experience in Congaree National Park outside of Columbia, South Carolina last winter. I lived in Columbia, South Carolina, and frequented Congaree National Park, so I'm familiar with the area. I often would jump the fence and walk the boardwalk at night, as it's super peaceful to walk the swamp and hear all of the wildlife. They never have a ranger or a guard posted up after hours, so I was always alone. The last time I did this was in October of 2021. I was taking my usual stroll with flashlight in hand. I should mention again, between the insects and frogs, the sound is loud. But then it completely stopped when I was about a mile in. I heard what I thought was my wife call me from the trail ahead, but she wasn't there. I was alone and she was out of town. I then heard water sloshing to my right and saw nothing with my flashlight. I chalked it up as to being tired and kept moving. The wildlife started up shortly after, and everything was fine. Maybe 15 minutes later, I noticed it got eerily quiet again, and heard swamp water sloshing to my left, but this time it was more deliberate, like someone or something walking. I was in a thick portion of cypress, and I couldn't see more than 20 feet in front of me. And then I heard my wife's voice again. Again, she was not with me. She's out of town, certainly not moving through the swamp at 1 a.m. I saw what looked like a human silhouette for a split second, but it was off. Very skinny, pale, and taller than me at 6 feet. I noped it out of there and ran the almost 2 miles back to my truck and didn't slow down until I heard the wildlife again. Like I said, this is a boardwalk that's in a swamp in the boonies. Nobody is walking around in the water at night without a light. And I don't know of any animal that big that walks bipedal patterns. And I've spent my life outdoors. I feel I should add that I wasn't high or sleep deprived. I just like the woods at night. I was so freaked by this, I felt I had to share this. Also, there is no way some meth head was stumbling through the swamp miles from civilization. That sounded like my wife. But then again, it's also South Carolina. Tonight's third encounter. In December of 2016, darkness came early to the woods of my home county, Kent. Mud splashed up my car as I assaulted the camber of a sordid country lane. The leaves on the ground had turned from pretty to pulp. The trees were bare and white. Familiar taste of poison was on the radio, and there was a perpetual tap of rainwater on the roof. In the back were 2 paranormal investigators, my lovely heathen girlfriend, I'm Catholic, but where I am meant to find a tiny bitty cryptid hunter goth at Mass, and her security guard friend who come on hunts with us and thinks it's cool. The air felt pregnant with anticipation as we pulled up in a lay-by. Let me explain, a few months earlier we had been driving through the same woods when there was still light in the evening, and that same girlfriend had seen something pale, humanoid and white moving through the trees. I didn't think much of it because I've been a paranormal investigator for 7 years, since the age of 18, and pale white humanoids are just a thing that can be found in the woods. Flip forward to that month, and we sighted an abandoned car on the edge of the woodland, a blue 2001 Rover. I ran its make, model, and number plate on the Vehicle Inquiry Service, taxed. I checked local crime records and Facebook posts, not stolen. Apart from scratches and bumps, there was no damage to the chassis or paintwork. Then not long after, I was driving through again. The woods are quite close to my house, and turned down a steep 24% gradient single-track road with few passing places. A half-ton stump of oak blocked the roadway halfway down. It had been pulled out of the ground. There was still earth on it, and there was no room for a tractor or a digger up there. Lorries haven't gotten a chance, so the hunt is on. That night, we had done the usual spiritual protection measures and carried big sticks and offloaded into the lay-by near a path that led into the woods. We pounded up a narrow defile after the introductory field, which opened to the lee of the main wooded overlooking a cleared valley, and then walked through. There were no problems at this point. We had heads on a swivel, sticks ready, and aside from the hooting of an owl and the occasional rustling, there was no sign of any creature awake. We filtered through a narrow single-file section of tightly packed trees, came to another field. We reached the path that led out onto the road, miles from our entry point. Nothing happened, so we spread out and started to nose around in the undergrowth, hacked through a few bushes, inspected a few runs and trails. Something bigger than any wild animal in the United Kingdom was about, and wait, those footsteps were of a biped. A small one, not the hulking thing my girlfriend had seen. Possibly a cryptid, possibly a fat chicken. We decided to retreat as the bushes, particularly holly, got thicker. A midget had a distinct home field advantage, but on the way back through the tightly packed bit, we began to hear something fowling. It didn't seem to come closer than the entrance. Then we heard movement off to the side, a jittery, uncertain sort of clack that didn't build up or slow down. It started, then stopped. Energetic, then not. The owl's hooting began to coincide with it, which slowly turned the owl from, just an owl, to a near constant presence in our minds. When we got back to the main wood, the clacking and rustling gathered pace and came from multiple directions, mostly from up the hill to our right. I volunteered to go back because, after an encounter in 2014, I really wanted to take a swing. But the gradual crowding of creatures implied that was not going to be an option. So as we began to run out of room, even as we picked up pace, it became harder and harder to keep formation. I remembered a trick from my youth, an eagle scream. I did eagle impressions as a kid, using some tightening deep in the throat, and it was so loud and unexpected that the pattern of rustling was broken, as if our stalkers did a double take. We used that opportunity to have it away from our toes, back into the defile bordered by thorns and barbed-wired fence, where we had the commanding position. They would have had to have run at us straight onto the sticks. They didn't charge. Well, we heard them move sometime after the scream. They didn't come anywhere near the road, and the excitement had died down long before we reached the car. I've yet go back in, only because they don't seem to be that much of a danger. Farmers have seen them run across fields, but rarely. Dog walkers go through there all the time. There are horses in the surrounding fields, and a few homes on the edge of the forest. Tonight's fourth experience. So I'm sharing this hopefully to get some help identifying what I saw, because I've been trying to figure this out for about 3 years now. I was a United States Marine from 2014 till 2019. I deployed to the Philippines to help out some joint operations against ISIS after the siege of Marawi. Basically, all we did was stare at the top of the jungle canopy looking for heat signs, then communicating fire missions for artillery and putting warheads on foreheads. Anyway, we're like 3 months into our deployment, 4 hours into this mission, staring at absolutely nothing. We're about 12,500 MSL at the time over the mountains of Basilan with real thick jungle canopy. Even with IR, crap is hard to see. It's like trying to find needles in a haystack with Vaseline in your eyes. But when something's above the canopy, like a helicopter, birds, or monkeys in the trees, it pops, and you can get some good definition depending on how good the camera operator is. A good trick to know if you have a hotshot camera guy is if they can fine-tune the IR to see leaves in the canopy instead of a big gray-colored blob, and atmospherics. I was the camera guy, and I was just chilling, staring into the void. My pilot was burning circles into the sky for hours. I asked my officer in charge of the flight if I could go smoke while the pilot took over the camera after I locked onto a geo point to keep the camera from going all over the place, and he said, yeah. So I went to smoke, and not a minute later, I hear my boy inside flying go, dude, you might want to get back here and look at this. So I went back inside all ticked off because I hadn't even finished my smoke. But then I saw what my pilot had locked the camera onto. I hopped back into the seat and take back control because I'm like, oh crap, hotspot? Is it a cow? Is it ISIS? But it's definitely none of those things. It's flying just above the canopy at a pretty good clip, flapping and gliding on what I can only assume were very large pointed wings. At this point, it's just a very dark shape moving over the canopy until I clean up the IR image and start picking out more. At first I'm like, dude, it's just a big-ass bird, but then I see a rounded head at the front and a small space in between what I assume was a tail, making me think of legs. We're at 12,500 MSL, so detail wasn't amazing, but you can make out general shapes. If I have a good day for atmospherics, light, and altitude, I can tell an RPG from an AK-47 if I'm lucky. Then my smart college-educated officer is check the measuring tool. Looks kind of big. We have a tool that uses geodata, altitude, and the aircraft's position, allowing you to use the laser and the program to let you know how long a distance is between 2 points. We mostly use it to measure buildings and artillery shot distances, but given we had the height of a canopy, we didn't see why it wouldn't work. So I took a screen cap of my cam and sent it to my pilot to work on while I was still on lock. He does math and comes up with roughly 6 foot in length, head to toe, and a 17-foot wingspan. As I watched it fly, I kept thinking, that looks like a bat. Just the way it flapped and moved, that general shape, not like a bird. I couldn't pick up feathers, and I didn't see a tail. Its wings definitely came out angular and stretched, just like a bat's. Me and the crew talked about it, passed it up to a higher level, but eventually we had to actually go and do our jobs instead of becoming amateur zoologists. But after that flight, I just couldn't shake the feeling or place what the hell that thing was. Fun fact, the tree right next to our smoke pit is absolutely filled with fruit bats, and it glows in the IR. So me and my pilot got curious and started asking the local Philippine contractors who worked at the Chow Hall and the PX. A bunch of them laughed and told us it's because we stay up way too late since we work the night shift. But a couple of the older ones told us about the tick-tick, some kind of big old flying MFer that eats babies. And I was like, oh, that seems to check out. In an effort to disprove giant baby-eating man-bats, I'm hoping someone can, come up with an answer. Tonight's final experience. I'd like to start off by saying this was told as a second-hand recall, as my best friend is not comfortable sharing. We'll call my best friend A for privacy reasons. Well, A and I live on the edge of our town in Wisconsin in this little cul-de-sac surrounded by woods. So it's not uncommon to see wild animals such as turkey, deer, fox, especially coyotes. Last year, when she first spotted the coyote that seemed too big to be a coyote, she didn't think too much about it and assumed some old lady thought it was a dog and was just feeding it. Well, towards the end of the winter this year, she saw it again, this time similar to the last. She noticed that something was off about this random coyote and pegged it off as a large coyote she saw during the summer last year. So, a bit of context behind A. She has a 2-year-old and is a smoker, so she often goes outside to smoke. Most times she's alone. About a week ago or so, A was outside smoking while her mom was watching the toddler. When she heard this clicking sound, similar to how one would summon a cat or a dog. Well, A's toddler just recently learned how to make that sound, and had been making that sound fairly frequently. So her initial thought was it was her daughter, but there was something really wrong with how it sounded. It didn't sound like her daughter. A said it almost sounded like someone trying to mimic her daughter, but couldn't go to do it right. A opened her front door to see if it was actually her daughter, but when she looked in at her daughter was sitting there quietly watching TV. She closed the door, still looking in, and heard the sound again. Her daughter hadn't moved from the position she was in. A looked toward the tree line and saw nothing. She heard a sound again. She looked towards the roof of her house and saw this weird fleshy thing that didn't look like anything or any animal she had ever seen. It looked at her and then jumped to the next tree to A's house. This is when she said the panic really hit her. We recently had a real bad storm that damaged that particular tree that this thing jumped on, so the tree had no branches and was very unstable. Even a bird would make it sway if it landed on the tree. So when she didn't see it sway or hear a thud, she got scared. A ran over to the tree and saw nothing, not even a shadow. She looked toward the tree line and didn't see anything, but felt very uneasy. Since that incident, every time she goes outside alone at night, she feels eyes on her and overall a sense of unease. On a few occasions, she'll hear bone-snapping crunches, similar to twigs snapping but louder and nastier, as well as growling. A said everything about it just seems off and totally wrong. Keep in mind, this only happens when she's outside alone. Whatever is only targeting her. She also mentioned that sometimes when she flashes a light towards the tree line, instead of the usual yellow eyes that shine back, they are white. Now, my friend thinks she may be just paranoid, as she now is terrified to be outside alone. Alright, folks, a very horrifying set of experiences for a very horrifying bonus upload. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. Your support is what makes the channel special and what continues for it to grow and go. Guys, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions and never stop looking for answers.